Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our live stream today. Our topic is choosing the right Azure certification path for your career goals. And I'm your host, Peter Van Rysem. I'm the Director of Marketing at Cloud Institute. And if you're not familiar with Cloud Institute, we are a training and coaching company that equips IT teams to confidently deliver on IT projects. We offer personalized coaching with cloud experts and hands-on project-based training to help you with those live projects. And speaking of experts, I'm happy to introduce our expert for today, Adam Gordon, who will be presenting. Adam, how you doing?
Good, Peter. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Adam is an advanced security practitioner, author, global speaker, educator, and executive with decades of IT experience. And I think I said last time too, is if I listed all the certifications, we'd be here for the entire half hour for sure. So before I do turn it over to Adam, though, I want to encourage you to ask questions in the comments, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation or at the end, depending on which is appropriate. Also, this recording will be here on the LinkedIn event page immediately afterwards, as well as YouTube. We'll try to keep things to just about 30 minutes. So without further ado, Adam, take it away.
Appreciate it, Peter. Thank you, and welcome to those of you that are joining us live. Pleasure to spend time with you. So in thinking about Azure and Azure certifications, right, probably the most important thing to consider and to begin thinking about is really the idea of defining what that system is built around. And Microsoft Learning is that entree point, right? That entryway for all of us that are looking to certify, at least in the Microsoft space with Azure. Every vendor has their own version, right, of Microsoft Learning to drive their certification pathways. But Microsoft Learning has been around for a long time. It has been the education outreach arm of Microsoft, focused on product evangelism and, by extension, certification and knowledge transfer and enablement across Microsoft's partner as well as customer ecosystems. It supports IT professionals, people such as myself, you, Peter, and any of us that are in that space. Also developers, data and AI professionals, and anybody who's looking to learn more about Microsoft and its products. We're focused in our discussions today on Azure, the public cloud, and the capabilities associated with that. But the reality is that Microsoft has products that span multiple areas. While many of them are hosted and available through Azure, not all of them necessarily are. But there are certifications that broadly range across that ecosystem as well. Whether you're focused on managing on-premise, hybrid, or cloud-forward, cloud-first infrastructure, Microsoft Learning will provide resources, many of them available to you for free, many of them available to you in multiple modalities and formats. They innovate and certainly have many opportunities for you to engage and learn in styles that make sense to you, much like Cloud Institute does. And the idea behind that is really about making sure that you can learn and engage with learning in ways that make sense to you. And so just want to lay out the thought process behind Microsoft Learning and what it is as we begin our conversation. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, Adam, I want to learn more about Azure. I want to get certified, but I'm not really sure what certification path I need or where I fit in. Well, there are 5 well-defined classes or areas that Microsoft tends to break the IT professionals and those associated with Azure into from a learning as well as from certification perspective. You can see them on the screen right here. Cloud IT professionals, hybrid cloud IT professionals. The difference there being cloud IT would be focused on cloud first and cloud only, whereas hybrid cloud would focus on both on-premise as well as cloud, and perhaps even multi-cloud environments would be fitted in there. Developers, as I mentioned, and then a grouping broadly for data and AI professionals. Data analysts fall into that category as well. And you can see in the graphic to the right of the list on the screen that we break out and really explain the idea behind these 3 all-up categories, right, and what they represent. So managing hybrid cloud infrastructure is where IT professionals would spend time. Developers are going to be focused on creating best-of-breed, best-in-class applications and experiences for users broadly ranging across those ecosystems. And data and AI professionals and data analysts associated with them are going to be supporting the use and wide distribution of and understanding of data and the stories it can tell across those environments. All of that is wrapped, as you can see in the graphic, by an area, dotted lines, kind of very, very shallow and light. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look, you'll see it there. Secure from the ground up is what it says at the bottom. And the idea is that we always want to be focused on and aware of security and its implications in any of the activities we engage in. And certification drives that focus and really creates that awareness for us in many respects. You could see an all-up look at the certification ecosystem, essentially the high-level certifications on the screen associated with each of those three categories: the IT professionals, the developers, as well as the data analysts and AI professionals. And I've broken that out for you so you can see that there are many, many opportunities for us to engage around certification, whether it's at the entry level, and I'll break these down and show you a graphic that represents each one with a little story about the kind of audience that they would represent in just a moment. But whether it's the entry point in the fundamentals area, whether it's moving through more advanced certifications as we build those skill sets and ultimately that awareness, or perhaps we focus on some of the specialty areas like the Azure for SAP workload specialty or virtual desktop specialty. You can see at the upper left-hand quadrant of the diagram here, perhaps Azure Cosmos DB developer specialty at the lower right-hand side for our developer friends who may be looking. Whatever it may be, you could see that these are mapped to those three buckets or three categorical areas that I mentioned, and we can see that there are multiple opportunities for each and every one of us to engage regardless of where we come from, regardless of the focus we have, and regardless of the areas of interest that you may want to move into over time. And what I often find in talking with customers, with students, with peers, colleagues, people just like you that are listening to us today, that there's often an interest in blending those learning experiences and those certifications. Yes, we do tend to be deep in the area that we spend the most time on and focus on, but we also tend to have interests in other areas, even though they may not be necessarily job aligned currently. And I want to encourage you to think about that and not be afraid to go out and pursue knowledge in those areas, and maybe even pursue one or more certifications in those areas. The trick, of course, is to try to get your employers to pay for those. And if someone is willing to fund your additional acquisition of knowledge and feed that itch you have to learn more, I think you should take advantage of that. It's an incredible benefit. Certifications, even though sometimes there may be some deals out there and some opportunities to do things in beta, for instance, where it may not cost anything, for the most part, on average, certifications cost a few $100s a piece, not to mention the additional soft costs associated with time that you have to invest in order to get ready, and perhaps the additional opportunities that you bring to bear on the flip side of that will certainly be worthwhile. But you do have to spend money and you do have to invest time. And you want to make sure you're getting the most value for that, but you also want to ensure that you're able to explore new areas and open up new opportunities as part of that. So just something to consider. Let's talk quickly about what those four key areas in the Azure certification learning path are. There are four places where we can begin and ultimately move through our journey, as I mentioned at a high level just now. We begin with fundamentals, and if you're certified in one or more fundamental areas, you'll get this badge, and this is what the badge looks like that you can attach to your certification profile. You can use on social media, things like that. For beginners who have just really started out in their journey learning about cloud, anybody who's at the beginning of that journey who wants to learn more and understand more about Azure would definitely fall into the fundamentals category. Azure fundamentals, the AZ900 exam and certified associated knowledge path that goes with that is the entree and the entry point for Azure. MS900, the equivalent on the Microsoft 365 side, would also play a part. And there are some different areas and different levels of focus you can pursue there. But it is something to consider, even if you're more advanced and even if you feel, oh, come on, I've been doing this a long time. I don't need to spend time on the fundamentals. I can jump right in, right? And I can move through and move into one of the more advanced areas, the administration, expert areas, architecture, specialty, et cetera. That's fine, but keep in mind, you're building a baseline and you're building a really solid foundation by starting with fundamentals. If it is something you can literally just go and do without minimal additional time and effort, so be it. But it is the proper way to build that learning path out It's not for everybody, but it is something just to consider and at least to be aware of. We move on from fundamentals to associate. Already familiar with Azure at some level, you want to jump in, maybe skip those fundamentals as I suggested, you can jump in here at the associate level. And this is what the badge would look like if you claim one or more of them. Again, you can use them on social media, attach them in a variety of ways, and celebrate the success that you're engaging with and ultimately are claiming as your own as you move through certification. Beyond associate level, we move to expert. The badge will look like this. Notice we're adding stars at the bottom as we go. You have a deep understanding and associate level knowledge already in Azure. You have one or more associate certifications, whether it's the Azure Admin Associate, the AZ 104 exam and associated learning path, or the Azure Developer Associate, depending on your focus, of course. Those are often cases going to be prerequisites for other stepping stones like the Azure DevOps Engineer Expert, or perhaps a focus in security, for instance, or architecture. So do keep that in mind as I point out on the screen. But this will be where many of you are going to wind up over perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 certification cycles as you gather certifications and perhaps the fundamental, certainly in the associate areas, and move towards one or more expert designations. So probably an endpoint for many of you, but not necessarily for all of you. There may also be a need, as I mentioned already, for you to go and claim one or more of the specialty certifications. There are several, the Azure Virtual Desktop, which is the AZ 140 certification and learning path. The SAP workloads or IoT developer specialty certifications come to mind in particular. There are others that are coming online. There's always a little bit of excitement around those as they get announced. No prerequisites in the specialty area, really just a focus on the ability to jump in and prove deep, specific product knowledge in one or more areas. If you work in these areas, you have a need and or perhaps because of a requirement through contracting or something like that, somebody says, hey, you need this in order to do that. This will be the area that you want to focus on. A one-to-one relationship, one exam, one certification. Whereas with the fundamentals, you also get a one-to-one. But in the associate and perhaps in the expert in particular, there's usually a one-to-several association. So you just want to make sure you're aware of that as you plan out your learning paths. And speaking of learning paths, let's take a look at what some of those prototypically will look like. I've created some documentation visually for us to be able to examine. This is a good way to summarize the learning opportunities and what the path looks like. I'll draw your attention just very quickly to the top of the screen where you can see that there is a key that shows you different graphics, instructor-led training, self-paced, virtual training days from Microsoft, all the way through to certification, practice assessments, things of that nature. I've used those to then key code the appropriate items as we look at essentially the Gantt chart kind of view of these learning paths. This will be the same for all the ones we'll look at over the next several minutes. And I would encourage you to think about mixing and matching your opportunity to engage, whether it is through the use of the resources provided by Cloud Institute, whether it is through the resources additionally that Microsoft makes available, and perhaps self-driven resource acquisition on your own. It is a blend of learning options that typically wins the day, just to be clear. So you can see if you're new to the cloud or new to Azure, Azure Fundamentals, as I mentioned, the AZ900 would be a best path to start from. You could see that plays nicely across all of the 3 major categories we've described. It is the entree point and the prerequisite starting point, although not required, as I mentioned, for anybody who really is looking to get in to those areas. If you want to step up and add the Azure administration credential, the AZ 104 exam would then follow from there. And you can see that focuses on the IT pros, whereas the data solutions, with Azure Data Fundamentals, the DP 900 and the AI 900 for Azure AI Fundamentals would play a part for developers. And the PL 900, which is Power Platform Fundamentals, will play a part for data professionals, both on the AI as well as data analyst side. So we can see a good look at the basic roadmap here. Again, don't have to begin here, but it would be a good foundation for any of you looking to build skills or to cross-train across more than one vertical. As we move beyond the basics and we look at what the training journey may look like by siloing and breaking out cloud IT pros versus other areas, Azure Administrator, AZ 104, is really the entry point for that journey. From there, you can focus on Azure Security with AZ500, Azure SAP Workloads with AZ120, and or Azure Network Engineering with AZ700, as well as the virtual desktop specialty with AZ140. I mentioned a few of these in my opening remarks already, and you can see them there. Notice that the Azure Administrator, the AZ104, is the starting point and a prerequisite to move on to any of those other ones, depending on what you're looking to do. So you would have a one to several, right, association in terms of certifications to gain one or more credentials, just pointing that out, making sure you're comfortable with that. Any and all of this information, by the way, certainly available through us here, and glad to have the opportunity to work with you, talk with you, and explain this to you along the way. Encourage you, as Peter has already done, to ask questions if you have them in the comments. We'll be happy to try to address those as we wrap up our conversations here, but also remind you that you can find this information not only through us, through a webinar like this, and certainly going back to Cloud Institute if you have any questions there, but you also can certainly go to Microsoft and see through Microsoft Learning and their websites the information as well and do a little bit of a deeper dive. You can find more information and also, by the way, find links to ultimately register for these exams through the exam provider. So you'd be working there to be able to get that set up. If you have your Microsoft certification profile already set up, you will just simply be able to register directly off the web page. It'll take you into the vendor website to do that. If you don't, you'll be encouraged to set one up and then schedule your exams accordingly. So please keep that in mind. Exams are made available online these days. They have been for a while. You can do them from the comfort of, well, just about anywhere, as long as you have a secure environment that's quiet and can be monitored through online proctoring. And recently, Microsoft made a very interesting announcement about the exam experience. They have now instituted a policy where you actually will have access to almost all, a little bit of an asterisk on this statement, but let's say about 95% of the Microsoft Learning ecosystem, meaning the web pages, the documentation, all the stuff that many of us probably look at on a regular basis to do our jobs and perhaps also to study as we get ready for certifications. They being Microsoft Learning, are going to be incorporating that into the exam process and give you access to it from within the virtual environment for the exam, so that you will be able to essentially go out and search for information if necessary as part of the exam experience. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to find every answer and have enough time to essentially just Google search, right, your way through the exam, or we should say, since it's Microsoft-centric, Edge search, right, or Bing search your way through the exam. But having said that, you will have access to the documentation. That's a process that's been in flight for about 6 or 7 years, believe it or not, to figure it out. It's been something that's been a very long coming, and I think well vetted, as well as very exciting development. Looking forward to it. Hopefully all of you are as well. If you're not familiar with that, if you have not heard about it, did not know about it, you can go out on the Microsoft Learning website and take a look for the announcement. It was made about three or 4 weeks ago now, and that is coming online over the next several weeks as it integrates into the exam experience fully. So something to look for there and certainly be aware of. As we move on to training and what training journeys look like for certification for hybrid cloud IT pros, you can see again, as we look at the screen here, that we have the ability to be able to jump in, not with the AZ104, because now we're focused in hybrid versus cloud only, but rather now on the hybrid side, the AZ800 and AZ801 courses, which lets us manage hybrid workloads both on premises and in the cloud. We then move and incorporate the AZ104, but it's not the starting point. It becomes an add-on as a secondary additional certification in the path, and perhaps also the Azure Virtual Desktop Administrator, the AZ140. But the entree and the entry point here is AZ800 and 801, which is the Windows Server Hybrid Administrator credential. Very important if you're looking in and working in the hybrid space. As we move beyond the hybrid cloud IT pros, let's look at Cloud IT Pro expert level. What are we looking at there? We return back to the AZ104 as our starting point for the Azure Administrator, but then notice as we move to the right, we see DevOps Engineer, AZ400. We see the Design and Implement End-to-End Cloud Solution, Azure Solution Architect credential, AZ305. Very important one, especially if you are going to be stepping up your skills and working in more senior levels of an organization around cloud enablement from a design perspective, perhaps adding security as a focus there as well with the AZ500 would also be welcome and very valuable. This is a role that is emerging and becoming front and center. When I say this, I mean the solution architect or cloud architect role, regardless of platform. Again, we're here talking exclusively about Microsoft and Azure today, but you see this exact mirror image of a training path and a credentialing thought process on AWS for Amazon, on GCP for Google Cloud. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk about those at some point in the future. But for now, just reminding you that regardless of where you sit and what platform you focus on, the need for cloud architecture and cloud design is becoming incredibly important, especially in organizations that are large and scaling and moving in either full cloud or hybrid cloud environments as they grow. And the skills and capabilities that a cloud architect and a design role bring to bear are very sought after. They are hard to find today. There are not many people that are doing this and have depth and experience. And if you have that depth and can validate that experience with a certification, you are going to be able to have some very interesting conversations with a lot of companies about opportunities, whether they're with your current company or other companies further afield. So definitely something to consider, but I think something that may be a target out there for many of you as you look ahead to the next 2 to 3 years of your career and what that arc and focus may encompass. As we turn our attention to developers, we begin, as you can see there, with the Azure developer capabilities. The AZ204 exam is where you would start. We then can add things like Azure AI Engineering or Cosmos DB Developer as needed, depending on area of focus, and perhaps ultimately a DevOps engineer certification with the AZ400 path as well. Developers need to have certifications in order to validate skills. They need to have hands-on skills and provide a body of work, but they also need to be able to show certification expertise. These certifications, without exception, except for the fundamentals, are all moving towards a hands-on, interactive, show your skills, don't just answer multiple choice questions approach. They have already over the last several years. Microsoft continues to refine, as do many, if not all, of the certification vendors out there today, this approach. So whether it's developing and writing code, whether it's administrating and architecting and securing, whether it is any of those things beyond the fundamentals tier, you're going to have to not just have broad knowledge and answer situational questions, but you're going to have to apply and demonstrate that knowledge. And this is, again, where an organization like Cloud Institute can be of great value to you, offering you that training opportunity, that skill up opportunity, and the benefit of their expertise with their mentors as well as with their platform to be able to give you the extra help you need to practice and get ready for those challenges in those exams. So don't overlook that opportunity and make sure it's something you're thinking about as part of your exam preparation. Very important. All right, with regards to training for data and AI professionals, as we get ready to wrap up, leave a few minutes for any questions that you may have. Managing relational cloud and hybrid databases with the database administrator. The DP300 exam is where you would start. Moving into Azure Data Engineering with DP203 and Azure Data Science and the Data Scientist with DP100 would be the logical flow that most people would pursue here. To be clear, this is a much newer set of credentials, a newer path, a newer thought process. This is evolving and emerging over the last 12 to 18 months, continues to refine as we look ahead to new innovative platform capabilities and acquisitions that build that platform, both for Microsoft and more broadly across all of the certification vendors that play in the cloud spaces today. But Microsoft is certainly one that is leading the way and is certainly providing a lot of capabilities, skills, and certification resources. So definitely want to make sure you're aware of that. There are a lot of opportunities here. This is a growing area. If anyone was to ask, I don't believe they've asked yet in the chat, but I'll throw the question out just to pose it so you're aware of it and think about it. If someone was to say to you, hey, what do you think is the growth area in cloud over the next 2 to 4 years that I should position myself to be a part of, where I can add value, but also, let's be brutally honest and let's be selfish for a minute, make some extra money and have some really cool and exciting career challenges? Data and AI focused professionals are going to be on the cutting edge of a lot of that capability and a lot of that ability in the next 2 to 4 years. That doesn't mean that our friends in security and IT and development are not going to have their own set of challenges and opportunities, but it means that the integration of these skills and these offerings into those areas is going to be a difficult journey. We're already seeing the pro and the con in that space now. It's going to continue to evolve. And professionals that are cross-platform certified, that can do IT, can do development, can do security, can do architecture, and or can add in data and AI focused, are going to be much more valuable to their organizations than just professionals that specify and exist in only one of those silos. So something to think about. Definitely an opportunity for you to consider, an opportunity to partner with Cloud Institute to find those resources and create those opportunities. The training journey for data analysts, you can see we begin here with the Power BI data analyst, the PL300, and add on the enterprise data analyst on the Azure side with DP500 if you're looking to play in that space. Again, new and emerging, evolving. These are undergoing iterations even as we speak about them, but there's really great content there. I've taught a lot of these courses and created content around a lot of these over the last 18 months already and continue to do so as I have opportunities to. I've been involved in looking at that content and seeing it evolve, and I can tell you firsthand, it's really good stuff and stuff that you should challenge yourself with if you have an interest. And then finally, just engage with you and thank you for your time and attention, offer you an opportunity. If you do want to reach out to me and connect, please look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to follow up with any of you as a additional step from our presentation. But Peter, I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. I want to turn it back to you, invite you to walk us through those as we get ready to wrap up.
Yeah, we sure do. Real quick, too, I want to show, I dropped something in the chat. We have a cloud career map that we made that kind of looks at the different certification paths for Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. So something to check out, too. You know, obviously, Adam went into more detail on some of those areas today, but, you know, a great starting point, too, if you're comparing the paths of the different providers. But yeah, we definitely did get some questions here. Here's the first one. Well, it's actually a two-parter from Angel, so this might take you a minute here. But first, I've been focusing on AWS and have some experience already. Is the transition in learning Azure easier, or is it very different? So let's start there.
Sure. So Angel, great question. Great body of questions because you asked two of them. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about both. So you've got a real good advantage here, right? If you've been spending time on AWS, excuse me, you have some experience already. You're looking at transition. The good news is a lot of what you already know is applicable to all three platforms. Let's include Google here just to be fair and to be equitable across all three. The differentiator, the gap, if you will, between those three is almost exclusively about what we call products and what those products are designed to do, as opposed to the fact that those products exist. For instance, you know, in AWS, we talk about a VCP, right? A virtual private cloud. In Azure, we don't talk about a VPC. We really talk about engaging with services and networking them and engaging around those services in a slightly different way. But we still talk about the concept of creating a carved out space where we can add those services. So from your perspective, there's not a lot of difference that you have to really worry about in terms of skilling. What you have to do is focus on the vocabulary and the conceptual idea of engagement around the platform, and then get comfortable with the interface and how we execute on those particular skills, right? If you think about it, they are all going to have a web API front end through a cloud portal and a command line option, but the language and syntax may be different in those areas. The look and feel is different. But the good news is you're probably 75% of the way there. If you have a background with AWS, you just need to add in the differentiators and you can begin that journey. And starting with something like AZ900 at the fundamentals level would be a great place for you to jump in. Second part of your question, if I'm not mistaken, was what are advantages with Azure over AWS that I've taken notice of or seen? I think platform specificity based on customer need notwithstanding, because I think the right way to answer that question to begin is to say certain customers and certain organizations have a preference, and we obviously, as professionals that support those organizations, have to be in tune with and obviously aligned with that. But having said that, I think the advantages of one over the other, I don't often talk about advantages. I think years ago we could have, One was better at certain things. One was perhaps a price differentiator in another area. I think today all three platforms are going to offer you the same great level of experience, engagement, and opportunity to spin up services and manage them appropriately and securely. I think the place I focus on with customers is not let's talk about advantage, but let's talk about your need. And let's make sure your need, your institutional, your organizational strategies, and your business requirements align with the platform. Meaning, is one platform going to provide you better capabilities in cost management, in platform provisioning through automation, infrastructure as code, in whatever it is that is most important to you? And let's compare those things and make sure that those requirements are aligned and being addressed properly. And I think that's the best way to guide a customer or guide yourself into what the advantages of a platform are. Because at any point in time, a platform may or may not be the advantageous right fit for you, because you may not have needs that platform is able to address better or more succinctly than others. And I think it's aligning with need that we then find the opportunity to open that dialogue and ultimately to have it be meaningful for a customer, if that makes sense. Peter, do we have any other questions or anything else?
We do. We got one more here that we'll get to from Efsal, who asks, what is the beginner cert for cybersecurity?
Sure, Afsal, great question. I didn't cover it directly because there is not a direct answer, but I did indirectly. The beginning path for you would be the AZ900 Azure Fundamentals. You would then move to AZ104, which is the Azure Associate Azure Administrator. Then you would move to AZ500, which is the Azure Security Focused certification. That is the logical path that most people will follow from beginning to end to prove their capabilities in Azure-focused cybersecurity. Those three certifications, those three credentials will allow you to prove and to validate those skills for an employer and to have hands-on skills to match those capabilities.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. And I think that's all we have time for on the questions. And I'll come back and say goodbye to you in a second. Just first want to let you know, we do have our Microsoft Azure Bootcamp. It's a great place to get started, prepares you to earn the certs. And a lot of the ones that Adam talked about, Azure Fundamentals, Azure Administrator, and Azure Solutions Architect. It also includes 2 hours of personalized coaching, which is really important to kind of help guide you through that path, as well as self-paced courses, demos, and hands-on labs. I'll drop that link in just a second. And if you're not quite sure where to start, we strongly advise getting advice from a personal cloud coach. So if you subscribe to our monthly or annual coaching, you also get access to our full library of training and labs at no additional cost. So coaching starts at just $64 a month, and it gets even better if you have a team as well. So if you're serious about that, check that out as well, and I will add that in to the chat as well. So Adam, before I let you go, any closing thoughts there?
Yeah, just two things. One, I see that Zia just threw a question in quickly to clarify Saul's question about where do we begin around security. And Zia, you're absolutely correct. The SC certs are another option. We didn't go into them just because they're not on the roadmap that we were focused on very broadly and generically today, but they are absolutely an option for you. Microsoft's done a great job of breaking down that AZ500 monolithic certification at the top end of security into a series of certification-driven opportunities, SC200, SC400, SC900 at the fundamentals level, et cetera, to break out the skills that an information security analyst and professional would want to pursue in different areas. The summation of those SC certs essentially is equal to the AZ500. We just chose to go high level to bring that fully in, but you could pursue that Afsal as well. Encourage you to take a look at the Microsoft Learning website or follow up with Cloud Institute. You can get more information through Peter and the organization either way. But Zia, thank you for bringing that up and reminding me of that. It's always good to add that in. In closing, I just want to thank everybody for their time, their attention, encourage you to go out and seek knowledge, seek engaging experiences and certification. Hands-on capabilities are the way that we are going and really the currency of the future in terms of showing relevancy to your organizations. Cloud Institute can help you with that. But whether you do it through them, whether you do it on your own, or you do it in a mixed environment, never shy away from taking the opportunity to practice. The more you do, the more you can do in terms of creating relevancy for your organizations. Peter, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time with you today. And thank you all of you for paying attention and participating.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you all for watching and the great comments that are rolling in. As Adam mentioned, we're always learning. So our next session is actually going to be with Adam again on Wednesday, September 27th. We're going to be looking at BCDR, incident response in a multi-cloud environment. So that'll definitely be important for anyone that has to deal with those kinds of things. But thank you all for watching, and we'll definitely see you next time right here. So thanks for watching.
Take care, everybody.